You are Locked On Falcons Postcast, part of Locked On Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Falcons Postcast, your home for the best Falcons football talk. It's the kind of local insight you couldn't get anywhere else, but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanisha Batiste. Joining me today are Aaron Freeman and Jarvis Davis. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code, all lowercase, Locked On NFL for a first deposit match up to $100. The Locked On Falcons Postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Fellas, I almost hate to say it because I feel almost like a broken record, but it really does feel like Groundhog Day or same song, different day, or oh, damn, they did it again, because that's what it is. And one thing that Rolando Bruce said is the Falcons gonna do is find a way to lose. That's what they gonna do. And you know what? Even though I know that is incorrect grammar, I cannot disagree with my brother, because that's what happens. 29-25 today. The Falcons take an unfortunate L against the Bucs. And it was just really, and you know, Jarvis, Aaron, for our team, I was in the stadium today. And I don't know, I want to ask you guys, but it was tough. It was really, really kind of tough watching that because it had so many ebbs and flows to it. And you just kind of really didn't know where this thing was going to go until we knew where it was going to go. But we're going to dive into the details of the game and kind of how it came to this loss for the Falcons. And we're going to talk about what's next for the Falcons, a road trip to Carolina, maybe even more critical now than ever next week. But first, let's talk. Free, JD, we got to talk about the takeaways on how in the world in this third year the Falcons have still not found a way to give Arthur Smith or get Arthur Smith 3 wins in a row. So, Free, you kept it real simple and said, you know what? Falcons are going to Falcon.
Yeah, T, this is basically the Falcon season summarized in one game, right? Because we've talked all year long about how this team has had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to, you know, create some separation, win some games that they had every opportunity to win. They did it again on Sunday against the Bucs, right? You have Younghoe Koo missing 2 field goals. You have 2 turnovers, plus a safety, you know, resulting in Bucs points. You know, you have an opportunity to convert in the red zone, a wide open Bijan Robinson, and you miss the throw. You know, and so I remember talking about this the last time the Falcons played the Bucs, where we sat there and said, hey, if they don't turn the ball over in the red zone, that's 21 points they left on the board. That's a 30 burger. You're having the same conversation again this week, and that just seems to be the story that we have every single week on this podcast. Every time we talk about this Falcon team in a position to take a step forward, to have that breakthrough game and show us that they're more than just this also ran. And they always fall short. And so, you know, it feels like the season is over, even though the season is not technically over. But it just feels like, I think this is, for me at least, the last time I'm going to get my hopes up that this team is going to turn a corner at this point in time. I just, you know, maybe I'll eat crow, you know, in a couple of weeks and whatever. But it just feels like, okay, this is who they are. This is what they'll always be. And, you know, I'm over it now at this point.
And, you know, Free, I just so thought we were going to I thought we were done with the couch. Like, I thought we were done with the psychiatrist couch and, you know, a kumbaya and a hug situation. I really did. But this was a tough one because I think it goes back to something that you said that I was also talking to some fans about. I happened to pop downstairs for a little while to see some friends, and it was kind of good because sometimes it's good to kind of hear from the Falcons fans. And one of the things I was talking about was the frustration of watching 9 points essentially be given to the Bucs, almost like, here's a 9-point lead, see what you can do. But then you just made a great point as well. When Younghoe Koo misses field goals, I mean, now you're talking about essentially, you know, a 15-point spread. But in all honesty, it felt like 50. It's the weird. I don't know how else to explain it, but like you said, it just felt like, my goodness, maybe this is who they are. And I'm not one who usually in the third quarter says, oh, it's a wrap, the Falcons aren't coming back. But when you take 11 minutes off the game clock, Jarvis, it is very, very difficult to ask your defense to do so much after they also pretty much erase the errors, I'll call them, the mistakes of that first half. It gets to be very difficult. And it's one of those things where you say as well, when it goes like that, then everything else pretty much has to go right. You can't have an Arthur Smith can't get right moment.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing, right? Because you talked about how this is who they are, but I think from a positive standpoint, the Falcons in these moments, I feel like they forget who they are. Because true enough, like, are there some advantages, some opportunities to take advantage of this pass defense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Sure, but you can't have instances where you go multiple drives where you pass the ball, you don't run the ball at all. Like that's unacceptable. And then when you finally figure out, okay, you see Tampa Bay start saying, you know what? I know we have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and you know, Baker Mayfield is supposed to be this capable quarterback and all this stuff. But we're just going to turn around and hand the ball off to Rachaad White. And that's what I felt like Arthur Smith should have done earlier, you know, because like when you get into these games where they're tight and every mistake is magnified to the nth degree, like that's when you go back to who you are, saying, you know what, we're going to run the football. I know that we out 7 offensive linemen. We don't have any starters in there and all that stuff, but let's run the ball and see what happens. Because at the end of the day, that's who you are. That's who you are. That's how you got this job. That's how you are one of the top 10 teams running the football in the NFL. So that's what gets me. That's what gets me frustrated. I'm like, all right, dude. Like, I know that you want to be able to, you know, take advantage of this defense. Tampa Bay secondary. True enough, and we saw that from time to time. Like, but it was an ebb and flow, right? Like, and sometimes, like, okay, Desmond Ridder make a good throw. Oh my God, he almost threw a pick, and I'm just like, dude, can we get in between sometimes? Like, can we just be average? Can we just get somewhat closer to the means? You know what I'm saying? Like, I hate playing the stock market watching football. Like watching the Falcons team play or watching Desmond Ridder play quarterback is like paying attention to the stock market and trying to get some money. Like, and it's just hard. It's hard sometimes because you don't know what's going to happen, and then you can't find a consistency. But in the end, then you come into a space where in the fourth quarter, where you see, okay, all right, let me get the ball to Bijan Robinson. Let me sprinkle some of this blue magic out on the field. Let me see how it rolls. And then, like, okay, why you didn't start doing this earlier? So it's just too many instances in games where, from a play call standpoint, I feel like Arthur Smith, I'm just like, dude, sometimes you just can't get out your own way. And I feel like that is a problem at this point. And to be honest with you, if you continue to do this, like, there's no reason for us to be having real conversations about winning this division, regardless of how putrid it is.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the things that we've kind of beaten the drum on in a good way, which is you can't worry about the fact that this is a befuddling, confusing, and somewhat disgusting display of football from time to time in this division. It is what it is. All you can do is do what you do and do it well. And I remember tweeting out earlier in the game, 3rd and goal at the 2 and a pass. That's what we're doing? When we've got Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, Cordero Patterson, and Desmond Ridder? And that's what we do? And it's little things like that. That's not your identity. Your identity at 3rd and 2 is you need to just pound that ball in. Even if all it gets you is a half yard, or if it gets you 1 yard and you've got to go for it on the 4th, but maybe it's 4th and 1. Maybe it's 4th and inches. But you at a 3rd and 2 really, really put yourself in a very peculiar situation that makes it that much more difficult. And in a game where it turns out that points ended up being a premium. I know the final score ended up being a 29-28, but you know what I mean. Points were a premium up until probably that midpoint of that 3rd quarter when the Bucs scored, and then, you know, the Falcons kind of caught their win in that 4th quarter. But before that, it's like, okay, this is kind of a paltry game that might come down to one possession, like 1 point type of one possession situation. You can't be out there doing things like that when you've got that stable, when you've got that running back room at your disposal. So yeah, it's one of those things where I kind of, and I saw a buddy of mine, I'll say this and then we'll go to break and we'll come back and deep dive a little bit more, but saw one of my colleagues at halftime and he literally was like, hey, you look like you're thinking, you don't know. And I was like, no, actually, I don't know what I'm thinking because I don't know what to make of what I just saw. I said, so all I can do, and don't laugh at me because it's going to sound real vain, but I was like, all I can do is look at my outfit and say, well, I think at least my outfit's matched because I don't think anything is matching on that football field today with what I'm seeing and what I expected to see. But my outfit,
that's where we are with it.
That's where we are with it. So on that note, guys, we're going to deep dive more into a little bit that went right, but a little bit that went wrong today as well. But before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe what your post-game commiseration meal might be with DoorDash. Well, guys, I don't know if you're like me, but when things get a little bit tight, I kind of like to eat some comfort food, and maybe that's how you are as well. And DoorDash might be the perfect way to go to get that comfort food, because this was a tough one to watch today. Falcons fall 29-25 to the Bucs, but that DoorDash can make it all okay. It's time for you to maybe pull out your positivity, your good jersey, your favorite app, which should be DoorDash. Get you some snacks, because hey, football season still has to go on, and your team is still at the top of the division, for crying out loud. Now, you might say to yourself, where do I order? How do I order? What do I order? Well, you can order just about anything. Pizza, wings, soda, burgers. You want it, they got it. That's 50% off up to a $10 value when you order through DoorDash, and when you spend $50 or more, of course, on that first order. So you're going to download the DoorDash app. That's what you got to do before you do anything. And then you're going to plug in code LOCKED23. Now, subject to change and its terms that apply. But again, 50% off, that's a good deal. Up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on that first order. That's at least a win for you today. So don't forget, download the DoorDash app, spend $15 or more, use the code LOCKED23, subject to change and terms to apply. All right, guys, we on this show try our best to still see the positive in things, right? So we're going to talk about that but we're going to have some real talk too, because I know you guys don't pull punches about that. The Falcons, of course, entered the fourth quarter down 9 points, and they did pull within 2. But then, as Jarvis said, we saw a little bit of pound town on the behalf of the Bucs. They just kept running and running the ball. For all you people that thought it meant something else. Now, it looked like it was over, but Mike Evans was out of bounds on the touchdown. The Falcons were able to hold the Bucs to 3, and then 9-5 breathed some life into the game. So, Jarvis, at least we saw some good signs. What turned for the Falcons offense in that final quarter so that they could actually make this a game and at one point take the lead?
Wide receiver 1 showed up. I think that, some of those balls, those 40-60 balls, or 30-70 balls, wherever you want to go with it. I think I got Mike Conti. He mentioned the offensive interception, which is absolutely just great. And the level of pettiness that goes with that comment is just absolutely amazing. But yes. I think that, them taking advantage of a matchup, right? Because we know that Drake London is a guy that can go up and go get it. And I think that Desmond Ridder, all he had to do was just give him a chance to catch that football. When he threw that ball down there and I saw Winfield lining that bad boy up, I thought that was for sure 100% interception. But you just seen Drake London just come out of nowhere, just snap that football out of the way. That's why you draft a wide receiver in the top 10, right? So I think that, we saw that's what Arthur Smith was trying to get at, trying to take advantage of the matchup. And I think that they did it. And I think that was one of those moments where we were riding high. Like, as far as when we talk about the stock was up at that time, at that particular time. And I think that, for them to be able to take advantage of it in that way and come as big as they did right then and there, it was great to watch. And I love watching that type of football. And, it's just unfortunate that we can't get that on a consistent basis.
Yeah, or in those moments, those final moments when it mattered, because, you love to see, Aaron, the 10 catches on 11 targets. That's amazing. That's an amazing day. 172 yards and just 3 yards short of getting that go-ahead touchdown. That was a tough one to watch. In fact, Drake London, I think it was so tough for him, he didn't leave the field for several minutes, just kind of sitting there, in utter disbelief of what happened. But you can't take away from the 9 catches before that to even put the Falcons in the position to retake the lead and ultimately win the game.
Yeah, Drake London balled today. It's hard to sit here and think, has he had a better game than he did on Sunday? I can't think of anything off the top of my head. So Yeah, he was great. Some other positive, the offensive line held up better than you thought, as Jarvis said,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
basically 7 guys out of the lineup. It seemed like every drive in the first
Yeah.
half, some
I think I
starter went
requoted
down.
for you like the same tweet, like I had to requote several times. It's like, oh wait, another O lineman.
Yeah. So the fact that held up, your secondary, we talked about it, to basically shut down Mike Evans, right? AJ Terrell, after 3 years of, for lack of a better term, sorry, AJ, getting bodied by Mike Evans, Mike Evans didn't do nothing today. And, until the very end, Chris Godwin didn't do anything. And a lot of that was thanks to Clark Phillips. So, there are positives you could take from this game, but it's like, putting lipstick on a pig at this point, I think,
Yeah. That's the tough part. And I'm glad you said it that way, Free, because we're going to talk a little bit more about those positives that we saw in defense, but we're going to get real and we're going to talk about the negatives as well on defense. But going back to offense, at the end of the day, I think Jarvis, you called it out earlier. When I look at a stat line and I see 26 for 40 for 347 yards or 338 yards after the sack, a touchdown and a pick for Des Ridder. I don't like that stat line because then I look lower and I see 26 carries for 96 yards. That's the stat line that bothers me because of the stat line before it. That was one of the downsides. Like, this to me wasn't a game where you had to throw it all over the yard. I don't feel like the Falcons were ever behind to a point where it was desperate enough for you to have to throw that ball 40 times. So Jarvis, when you think about it, I mean, yeah, you did have kind of a patchwork O-line, but again, you still had that running back room. What happened such that the Falcons weren't able to take advantage and maybe dictate that game, like you said, a little bit more often, but maybe even to your point earlier on the ground?
And to be honest with you, it feel like Arthur Smith just didn't have confidence they were able to get it done, because that's the only way I feel that you put the ball in Desmond Ridder's hands. Hey, man, lead us to victory with your arm. Like no, no, that doesn't sit well with me. I don't think that Arthur Smith, well, Will can go off of what we see, right? He felt like he had more confidence in Desmond Ridder than he did in his backfield. And that's truly unfortunate. When you take a running back in that top 10, like they did with John Robinson, give him the ball. Give him the ball. Like, at the end of the day, I don't mind you turning around and handing the ball off to him 22, 23 times and then throwing the ball to him 4 to 5 times. I don't mind at this point, because that's who you are. That's how you built this team, and that's what you need to go with. But just like, there is just no reason for me to feel confident when I think we had a couple games like this early on in the season when Desmond Ridder was having some, from a yardage standpoint, some decent games. It's like I don't feel comfortable with Desmond Ridder throwing the ball that much. And I'd rather see 40 times, on the other end, and then split up between 3 guys. Like, I don't want to see this team throwing the ball 40 times. I just don't think this offense is nowhere near being able to win games like that. And it's just truly unfortunate that Arthur Smith feels that way.
Yeah, that was a tough one as well, especially because, like you said, you had an offensive line where, hey, they came into the game knowing that they were gonna be without Caleb McGarry, they were gonna be out Drew Dahlman, but then of course Jake Matthews goes down for a stretch, Chris Lindstrom goes down for a stretch, and it's like, oh my God, now it's true patchwork. But you did have Matthew Bergeron, just as an example. You tweeted out that you really liked what you saw as far as how he was able to spring Bijan Robinson open, so Bijan Robinson could go in for that score. So yeah, you do get frustrated when you see those instances happen and you don't go back to sort of what got you to the party. Meanwhile, it's also painful watching on the flip side where they're running it down your throats and daring you to do something with it, and you're keeping your defense out there for like 11 game minutes. And I mean, that's just a kind of a recipe for disaster. And then, you look at the flip side now on defense, once again, Aaron, this Falcons defense in all sorts of ways held down this team until the offense could kind of catch up, right? And this was not an easy task because, again, they were down some guys as well. No David Onyemata, no Nate Landman. So they were kind of, for lack of a better term, swimming upstream, if you will, too. So, but we did see some good things. Obviously, we saw Jesse Bates III be Jesse Bates. That was huge again. And although I know it wasn't good for him at the end, I think Clark Phillips is also one of those standouts that had a good game, like I said, up until maybe that last moment.
Yeah, Caden Ellis also played really well.
Yes.
Calais Campbell came up with a big stop towards the end on that 3rd and 1 type of play, and Andre Smith even nearly on the 4th and 1, punching the ball out and almost getting the fumble recovery there. So you saw a defense that they gave up the field goal on the opening drive, and then the rest of the Bucs points in the first half were, as you said, off of the turnovers and the safety, and then only really, and pretty much kept the lid on the Bucs offense in the 3rd quarter outside of that one drive, where, as you guys said, they took the Falcons to Pound Town, running the ball down their throat towards the end of the game. And so, the defense played well for 3 quarters, and then you just kind of needed them to play well for one more series, and they didn't necessarily have it there at the end to get that stop. They got real close, but they just couldn't get over the hump. But yeah, when you look at this game overall, like you look at the shortcomings on the offense more so than the shortcomings on defense, I think, at this point in time, especially given all the injuries at the Falcons defense. They played above themselves, I think, at the end of the day, right? We can certainly nitpick some of the struggles with against the run, and some of the plays they gave up, but they as we've talked about all year long, for the most part, they've brought it pretty much every single week, and they came up short.
Yeah, I think if you have a conversation where I think last week Mike Evans had like 148 yards catching, and this week you held him to 8. Yeah, I mean, to me, you've done your job in big number, in a big way, and in small numbers, holding Mike Evans, and even to your point, Free, holding Chris Godwin until the very end. And another thing, Jarvis, that we saw that I thought was a good look was we'd had conversation in our last couple shows, the sports party on Thursday, and even the Falcons party earlier in the week, talking about guys who we wanted to see kind of step up. And we saw it. Kentavious Street, we were like, hey, we hadn't heard your name a couple of weeks, heard his name called in a good way. And of course, your guy, Bud Dupree, we heard his name called a couple times in a positive way too.
Yeah, I mean, those are some of the things that, you always appreciate, right? Because, like I said, you knew that, with David Onyemata being out, and you already got Grady Jarrett down for the season, like that interior side of that defense was looked pretty meek. And I think that, with Calais Campbell being able to slide down, that was very helpful, because you have a guy like that pushing the pocket and being able to, you're going up against a 5'9" quarterback in Baker Mayfield, that's some of the things that, that can work out to your benefit. So I think it was an all-out effort, and even Albert Huggins, those guys like that, those guys stepped up. Like, I can't, it's hard for me to critique this defense in a negative way, because, like I said, like Aaron said, they played above themselves. There was no way they were supposed to win that battle up front today. And the only thing they didn't do was put Baker Mayfield on the ground. But like you said, that secondary and pushing the pocket or flushing Baker Mayfield off the spot, kind of worked out in their favor for the most part. And it just truly sucks that they were the last unit on the field, and everybody's gonna look at them and say, man, all the defense had to do was make that stop. But man, it's so much more to the story.
It really, really is. Yeah, because making that stop in the 4th quarter even started with what we didn't see in the 3rd quarter, which is those guys get a breather for their offense to give them some life until the 4th quarter. But again, like you said, the 29 points don't tell the true story, because that's not as much on the Bucs offense as maybe a moratorium on what the Falcons offense did not do. And we'll talk a little bit more about where the Falcons go from here, because they've got a road trip to Carolina next week, and it's going to be critical because of the logjam that now is the NFC South first place. But before we do talk about that, we're going to give you guys some deets on PrizePicks. Well, there are things that can make you happy in this world, even when the Falcons aren't the ones making you happy. And that's maybe taking a stab at PrizePicks. It's the largest daily fantasy sports DFS platform in North America. So if you hear DFS, now you know what it means. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. Just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Now, here's the thing with it as well that I really, really like. PrizePicks offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this season. How cool is that? Because I'm sure a lot of us, other than Jarvis, by the way, I'm sure a lot of us use Apple Pay in and out of our daily interactions with our finances and resources. What a cool thing to be able to do. And also, you can test your skills on PrizePicks, which is an exciting way to play fantasy sports, because maybe you can turn $10 into $250 and do it with just a few taps. So how do you get it done? Pretty darn easy. You go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use that code for a first deposit match up to $100. It's easy. It's easy. It's easy. And why do I keep saying that? Because I know you've had a rough day. So don't forget to check out PrizePicks by going to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use the code for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Falcons didn't make your day. Maybe PrizePicks can. All right, guys, it is now time to preview the next game. And it's so frustrating because I really thought that we were going to be having this conversation that many have been waiting for us to have for the last couple of years, which is Arthur Smith has his first 3-game winning streak. Well, it didn't happen. And not only did it not happen, but it happened on a day where the Bucs beat the Falcons to end that winning streak. It happens on a day where the Saints beat the Panthers. Now there's this log jam at the top of the NFC South, a division that, like we always say, or we used to say in New Orleans is a city that care forgot. NFC South is the division that care forgot, because here we are. So next week, going into Carolina, Jarvis, what do the Falcons need to do to potentially put themselves in a situation where maybe they can reset and get back to the top of this division by themselves?
Like, have some self-awareness. Can I just start? I hate to try to be deep on this thing, but like, just know who you are. Like, you're not a team that is going to put yourself in position to win games by throwing the ball 40 times. It's just not going to happen, especially who you got at quarterback. And that's not an indictment on Desmond Ridder. Not at this point. Let me say that. Not at this point, because you got so many weapons surrounding him. You got a guy that you can turn around and hand the ball off to. He's explosive. You got a running back that got the franchise record for rookie franchise rushing record in Tyler Algier. So you have so many weapons back there. You built your offensive line to be that run block is their strength. So, and I think that you're going to have to use that. Going into this game in Carolina, you're going on the road, so this is going to be that has been a challenge as well. You were able to get a win in New York against the Jets last week, but can you go on the road and get another win in a division that is going to be similar to a playoff game, I guess? But the Panthers look awful against the Saints today, and I think that it's and I hate that we keep saying this, because I'm getting tired of saying it, because it's like, oh man, they still have a chance, but they just have never been able to really just grasp it. And that's what concerns me. That concerns me a lot when you're talking about this organization, Arthur Smith as a head coach, this offense, and I'm not going to even mention the defense, because those guys are in a separate conversation right now to me. Yeah. Because those guys have been pretty consistent, like Aaron mentioned earlier, throughout this season. They had some hiccups. Of course, they're going to have hiccups. But I think that, going forward, this game, if whether or not the Falcons get on the playoffs, is all going to boil down to the offense. Period. Yeah. If they want to get into the get a win in the NFC South and get into the playoffs and have a home game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the first time, it's going to be on. We're going to be saying Arthur Smith finally figured it out, or Arthur Smith finally figured out who they were, and Desmond Ridder was throwing the ball 20 times, 22, 23 times a game, and they were running that bad boy 35, 40 times a game, and they were getting everybody involved in this offense. That's the only way. That is the only way the Falcons are going to get in. It is not going to be because this defense has been lights out, forcing 5 and 6 turnovers, and Jesse Bates scoring 3 touchdowns a game. That's just unrealistic. You can't depend on this defense like that.
Right, because in essence, Jarvis, that's just been keeping you in the game. I mean, that's
right,
the reason
exactly,
that you've been blown out, to be quite honest with you. And I agree with you as well. It's all on the offense. to do their job, to know their identity, and free just to, I tweeted something earlier today. I was like, and it was a good one, but it kind of had a subtle undertone to it as well. Like, great that Desmond Ridder has selective amnesia, meaning, hey, he forgot about that near pick six, moved on, did what he needed to do, for the rest of the game. But the challenge is you can forget about the pick six, but you can't forget about the damage that's done and keep expecting the defense to then undo the damage. So I agree with Jarvis. I think that the offense has got to it has to stay consistent with the identity. I hate to even say get back, to be honest with you, because we did see it somewhat last week in terms of the run game. Maybe not what we wanted or thought we were going to see because of the sloppiness of the game, and maybe there's some, some execution challenges there. But ultimately speaking, here's what you're looking at. And Aaron, I'm going to throw this out only because it's not even about one game at this point. You got the Panthers next week. You come back home, you got the Colts. You go on the road to the Bears, and then you go on the road to the Saints. So that could go all kinds of ways because, the Panthers, they're less than middling, so you probably know what you're going to get with them. But the Colts tend to look good more than they look bad. And we know what the Bears did today against Detroit. So it's like they'll show up and be, that team from time to time as well. And if the Saints have a snowball's chance in hell to win the division in the final week, and you got to do it in New Orleans, that's a tall order. So you almost want to look at it, Aaron, as like the final quarter of the season, and what do they need to do, not just next week, but use next week to set the stage for the final quarter of the season.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, T. They lost control of their destiny losing this game, right? Because now they got to win, potentially 3 out of their 4 remaining games are on the road. And we've talked all year long about how this team doesn't particularly look great on the road. And so this was, you had a golden opportunity. If you want to think of it as fourth quarter, right? We just ended the third quarter and the Falcons had the ball in the red zone, ready to score. And they threw a pick in the end zone. And so they come away with no points. And now they're behind the 8 ball, so to speak. They still have a chance to dig themselves out of it. If you want to use that football analogy, like the score's still close, right? It's still a tied game going into the fourth quarter, but you had an opportunity to kind of not say put it away, but at least take that lead and put the pressure on the opposing team in this game analogy that we're talking about. And they threw a red zone interception, and that's kind of what it feels like, where it's just like, okay, like, hopefully they get it right. Hopefully they come back next week against the Panthers and play better and get that win and, wash this bitter taste out of their mouth. To me, I think the key for me sitting here right now is, just get healthy. And I think it will take care of itself with all the injuries that they have on both sides of the ball. But, right now, it does feel like you just watched Desmond Ridder throw a pick in the end zone like he did in that Washington game, and you're like, what are we doing here? Like, and it's just like, all right, I guess this is how it's going to be going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, no, I'm going to leave it right there because that analogy, I don't think there's a better way to tell the story than that analogy. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We definitely appreciate you guys stopping by the Locked On Falcons postcast, but it doesn't stop here because we are going to spend some time breaking down this game even further tonight and giving you guys even more reaction on tomorrow's Falcons Atlanta football party. So we'll talk more Falcons tomorrow. Make sure you stop by.